Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us in person and online today. I'm Dr. Marco Reggiani. I'm a researcher at the University of Strathclyde. I work with Becky at what we call here as prescribed activity. One is one of the many activities that Ignite is doing. And in particularly, our aims are exploring diversity among STEM and energy researchers, but also investigate climate in research environments, including systemic barriers and support mechanisms that enable more inclusivity. So the work that we do hasn't started with Ignite, and in fact this activity builds on the EPSRC-funded STEM Equals project, where we investigated particularly the experiences of women and LGBTQ+ staff and PhD students in STEM. And we had some key important findings there that inform our work. For example, we found that systemic challenges were reported 4 times more often than supportive experiences by our participants, and that was is a big problem if you feel that in your work environment you are more challenged than supported. But also, and that is also important, we found that good practice and support mechanisms existed. However, they were inconsistently applied across departments and groups. So there are some groups and departments in the university where inclusivity was quite good, but others were quite behind. The project led to 6 recommendations that were all accepted by the university executive team and are now being implemented. And this also shows that these kind of projects can have quite a substantial impact on organization and make some change. So building on this activity, at Ignite, we designed a survey to investigate more broadly issues of climate, challenges and support in STEM. And we started by running this survey at Strathclyde for 3 months at the end of 2023. So we had 202 valid responses from some staff and PhD students in STEM, and 32% of participants, so 64 people, shared that they were doing energy research in full or in part. As you know, energy is quite difficult field to define, so we were trying to understand who was doing that. And we didn't find any significant kind of difference in terms of demographic characteristics between the broader STEM pool and energy researchers. I'm not going to discuss the demographics variables in details. In terms of race, ethnicity, and gender, what we found was pretty much in line with what is known by the university, by the composition of the overall university. I'm trying to kind of draw your attention more to sexuality, disability, and social class. So in terms of sexuality, we found that 28% of participants identified as LGBTQ+, which is far, far higher than what the university knows. So in terms of staff, the university estimates that 5% of people are queer. A similar conclusion we can draw it for disability. So we have 23% of participants who identified as disabled. And also here, the university has a much lower number, I think is around 10 or 13%. And the university doesn't really collect information around social class, especially for staff. And here you can see that 65% of participants came from families where the main income earner was from a professional background. It's quite difficult to measure social class, but this also still shows our research environment are quite middle class, high and middle class affair. So a lot of people are excluded here based on their social class background. So in the survey, we explored many different things, and today I'm going to focus on climate in work and learning environments. So your perception, let's say, about how you are treated, how you feel included or excluded. And we focus on this variable because climate is a key to understand the experiences and perception of diverse staff and students population in any organization, as Alasdair was saying. Climate is also linked to intention to leave. So we were trying to understand, issues of attrition and retention. And this association is indeed supported by our findings. As climate improves, the intention to leave academia and one's field decrease. So it's important to work on climate if you want to keep people. So we investigated perception of climate on a 5-item scales. there were many different items that we asked participants to rate on a 5-point scale. For example, is your work environment friendly or hostile, inclusive or exclusive, things like this. And then we averaged these items to form a composite measure of climate. Results indicate a moderately positive perception of climate for staff and PhD, PGR students in STEM, which is nice and probably is a testament in a way of the work that we and other project and the leadership team has been doing at the university to slowly improve things in the past 5 years. We then used the stepwise regressions to try to identify some key predictors of climate perception. So we started just trying to use demographic variables. Are different groups different in terms of their perception? And we have this significant model that has not a very big explanatory power, but it was still an interesting starting point. And here, as significant predictor, we found that identifying it as disabled led to more negative perceptions of climate, whereas identifying as Asian led to more positive perception, and probably further analysis of our data might help to explain why there were differences between these two groups, but we can start to have some ideas about that. We then tested 9 different predictors that instead were related to personal experiences, personal experiences of inclusion or exclusion. And we found, again, a significant model that here has a much stronger explanatory power than the one we just explained with just demographic variables. And in terms of significant predictors, on the negative side, as expected, we found that having direct personal experience of exclusionary behavior led to more negative perceptions of climate. On the flip side, and that was quite reassuring based on the work that we do, we found that open discussion, having access to mentoring and support, and feeling that you are valued by your colleagues and peers led to more positive perceptions. So that was a good finding. We then tested, all these predictors together while controlling for demographic variables, and we found, like the predictors slightly change. But on the negative side, again, experiencing exclusionary behavior leads to more negative perception. And interestingly, we found in this model that being from the EU and having caring responsibility were also factors that kind of influenced the climate perception to a more negative perception. And on the positive side, again, open discussion remained significant as well as being valued, in this case, by managers and supervisors. So these findings kind of reinforce what we found already as STEM equals. This was a diagram that we created to explain the effects of systemic challenges. And indeed what we found confirms that experiencing bias and exclusionary behavior leads to more job dissatisfaction in a way, and has a lot of different consequences. For example, that you need to put in increased effort to sustain your STEM career and remain in your field. On the contrary, and as shown by our work at the survey, having access to support is very important to increase a positive climate perception, but also support you in your career. And there's many different ways in which you can be supported, and starting from kind of individual interactions with your managers, your colleagues. We saw in the survey, feeling that you are valued. This is a very individual type of support. But then, as support moves from this local support to more systemic things like practice, for example, putting in effort to create an environment where we can have open discussion, this has even more kind of stronger effect on your satisfaction. So in conclusion, just to wrap up this short presentation, our finding and ongoing analysis suggests that the day-to-day experiences that people have, how they are treated, whether they feel valued, supported, or excluded, are stronger predictor of climate research environment rather than considering demographics alone. However, it's important to notice that historically marginalized groups may still be disproportionately affected by exclusion and lack of support mechanism. intersectional analysis across datasets and contexts is needed to better understand these experiences. Also, we recommend, as always, that institutions should prioritize building inclusive environment, not just increasing diversity. Actions that systematically address exclusionary behavior and improve climate are key to transformative change. So that's all for me. I don't know if there's time for questions.
We'll do questions. I think we'll do them in the group at the end.
Okay, that's fine.